true genius that comes from, well, this was Wagner's case, real German musicians, and that of course is a deeply disturbing, racist observation to make. Hello everyone and welcome to the Music Professor channel. I'm here with Loki and we're here to talk about Mendelssohn today, and I'm going to start with something that the late great Charles Rosen, musicologist and pianist, said about Mendelssohn. He said, "The songs without words have a Mozartian grace without Mozart's dramatic power, a Schubertian lyricism without Schubert's intensity. If we could be satisfied today with a simple beauty that raises no questions and does not attempt to puzzle us, the short pieces would resume their old place in concert repertoire. They charm, but they neither provoke nor astonish. It is not true that they are insipid, but they might as well be." That's quite harsh, isn't it? I mean, it's a classic case of damning with faint praise. He acknowledges Mendelssohn's Mozartian grace and his Schubertian lyricism, but he thinks the pieces lack that special something that ignites a masterpiece. Well, I just don't think that's true, and I think the argument is weirdly reminiscent of the sort of thing that Wagner said back in the 1860s, his famous anti-Semitic diatribe, Jewishness in music, which includes scandalous things about Mendelssohn, and I think he planted that seed that still exists in the cultural imagination, that Mendelssohn's music is essentially bland, trivial, full of fluency and facility, but it lacks the true genius that comes from, well, this was Wagner's case, real German musicians, and that of course is a deeply disturbing, racist observation to make. Mendelssohn's music is not like Wagner. He's a very different kind of composer. But what's that got to do with anything? Every composer is different from any other, and that's why I'm pretty hostile, really, to the kind of thing you get in musical commentary all the time now, which is this is better than this is the greatest whatever, this is the GOAT. And we all play these games and they're entertaining, but they're nonsense. Such and such a composer is different from another composer. You can't say, Mompou, the great Spanish or Catalonian pianist composer, is better than Schoenberg. Who was a contemporary of his. The two composers are simply existing in different spaces. There's really almost nothing that can connect them. And so Wagner and Mendelssohn are very different composers. I love both of them. Right, let's look at this whole business of intensity. I'm going to play from Mendelssohn's Opus 62 set of songs without words, which were written in the 1840s. I think they belie, as many of Mendelssohn's pieces do, that old myth that he wrote great music when he was young. He wrote the Midsummer Night's Dream Overture when he was 18. He wrote the string quartets, first two string quartets, which are fabulously brilliant and imitate late Beethoven in the most perfect way. In some ways they have more facility than late Beethoven, although I'm not saying they're better or more profound. They're incredible though. He wrote those when he was 17, he wrote the octet when he was 60. I think I've talked about all this in other videos on the channel. And I've also made the case that Mendelssohn was probably the most accomplished teenage composer in history. I mean, that is pretty incontrovertible. Of course, Mozart was an astounding genius as a young composer too. I mean, amazing. And he didn't have the cultural resources that Mendelssohn had as an affluent young person living in a household where Goethe was a regular visitor and so on. So, the Mendelssohns were very lucky, but they were also brilliant. Felix and Fanny Mendelssohn were both brilliant teenagers. Right, I'll stop talking. This is not a work that he wrote when he was a teenager. He wrote this in his mid-30s, and what I was going to say was that the old myth is that Mendelssohn was very brilliant as a young man and then became mediocre or conservative or whatever, stale, bland. It's not true. So here he is in the mid 1830s, and this is the most perfectly constructed little miniature. Now this is the thing, this is a piece that's constructed in a tiny shape, and it's written for, not necessarily for virtuoso pianists. This is available, it's accessible to pianists who aren't able to play, for example, the Chopin etudes. But it has amazing musical wealth inside it. And if you're a composer, you could do much worse than looking at what Mendelssohn can do with musical material. So what I'll do is I'll play it and then we'll talk about it. So it's a funeral march. Well, no marks for noticing that a very, very famous composer was influenced by this piece. Another composer who perhaps shared with Mendelssohn a slight sense of alienation within his own culture, a Jewish composer from Bohemia, and his name, Gustav Mahler. And there's no question that this piece influenced Mahler, because the majority of Mahler's symphonies begin with funeral marches. Several of them begin with these extraordinary funeral marches, and one of them, number 5, the Middle Symphony, famously begins with this trumpet solo. I mean, it's the same. Isn't that fascinating that this piece had that impact on the young Gustav Mahler, presumably when he played it? Mahler would have played probably all the songs without words. He was a decent pianist. He used to play prodigious amounts of music. So this is something that influenced Mahler. So anything that influenced Mahler, you'd have to say, well, that's a significant thing, isn't it? And isn't it strange, because it's almost an unknown piece? I mean, everybody knows Mahler's Fifth Symphony. Of course, Mahler's Fifth Symphony is one of the big pieces of the concert repertoire. This little Mendelssohn piece, barely known, and yet isn't it extraordinary the impact that it had on Mahler? So let's look at what makes the music so marvellous. You've got this fanfare, very dramatic rhythm with the sort of dotted feel and these tiny rapid, and you've got these rapid triplets, very like a kind of martial trumpet style. And then the thing that influenced Mahler, the rising third, falling back a third again. And then the answer, with, again, the rising third, this time going up another third. And then you get this, very typical of Mendelssohn, this beautiful hymn. He's a very fine hymn writer. And so this is in a kind of chorale style. Look at this, the climax of the phrase. So sometimes the question to ask yourself with an amazing piece is, what would a less impressive piece do? I think this phrase, you might expect this, imagine Hubbard or someone writing that, and I don't, with all due respect to Hubbard. What's so marvellous about this is you rise up the E minor, it's all in a sort of three-part counterpoint. Look at the climax on the A7, A minor 7. There's something surprising about that. The style is sort of noble, public, hymn-like, but there's a sort of poignancy about this chord. It's beautiful. And then the answer, piano, absolute contrast with this intimate, rather tragic response, and this strange plagal cadence coming off the fourth degree of the scale and the delayed resolution, so you get that lovely sort of appoggiatura feel, which I guess he'd learned from his study of Bach. He was a big Bach specialist, of course, Mendelssohn. Here we get it again. Now, composers, never repeat yourself without some kind of variation. Look at this. Now, the spacing on that lovely climactic chord is just a bit more intense. Rosen said that Mendelssohn couldn't be intense. That's nonsense. So what was it originally? It was it was this, just a straight A minor 7. Here's, it's an A minor 9. It's got that wonderful yearning appoggiatura. Isn't that beautiful? Okay. Answer. He'll reharmonise this a little bit. Look at this. The C sharp. Doesn't that bring something to this phrase? And then flattens the 7th so that you just get a different, just nice little variations to that second phrase. Then the middle bit builds up. He orchestrates this rather beautifully. Look at the left hand joining in, the right hand climbing in three-part counterpoint. And here's the great moment of the piece, I think. You might have, look at that. Even Beethoven might have done something rather less exciting than what Mendelssohn does do, which is at the climax. The topic of this piece, incidentally, is that at the climax you go to an A minor chord. Look at the, do you remember the main theme? Went to A minor 7, and he does the same thing. A minor, but look at this. Each of these chords is dropping. They're all first inversion chords with a pedal note at the top. It seems simple, but it's not normal. Let me know if you can think of any other piece that in the history of music that does that arrives at a climax point and then you get a procession of, in this case, first inversion chords moving away from it with a pedal note. It seems simple, but listen to the effect of it. I'll do the build-up. Oh, I love these too. The way he voices the right-hand chords here. Slightly like Bach, but doesn't really sound like Bach. And here comes this procession. And he's not done. Here's another procession. there's a modulating procession of these first inversion chords against the pedal notes, and it just creates wonderful downward spiral. It seems simple. It looks simple on the page, you know. It's not Chopin. We haven't got immensely complex harmony, but what Mendelssohn does with relatively simple, straightforward things is sort of a bit of a miracle. So let's just watch that procession. In fact, I'm just going to play the two lines. Here's the second one. It's wonderful, isn't it? Okay, let me play from that second line. It's partly the way the chords are spaced, you know, if he didn't... Each dissonance is very beautifully heard, with a lovely rich spacing on the right hand, and you know, it's always a good idea to have a big gap between your bass and the top. This is beautiful chorale writing, really. And then he arrives on the dominant. Here's the Mahlerian motif, this time on the 7th. Isn't that brilliant? On the dominant 7th, and he does it again with harmony. And that's, of course, the same as the second phrase. You know, if you went back to the beginning of the piece, he's echoing the second phrase, but it's got huge amounts of power here because of the way they're the harmony's moving towards the dominant 7th, and this colossal, I mean, this is only a piano miniature, it's like a huge symphony, this recap. And it is Mahlerian, it has enormous force. And look at this shift of harmony, beautiful shift to the major. It's as if, there's hope, there's optimism for a moment. There we go, we're in a place of triumph. But no, look at this. The dominant 9th. Gorgeous and tragic, absolutely tragic. And here a procession of modulating to C, modulating again to D minor, modulating to G, with a beautiful augmented chord there. Doesn't that D sharp bring something to that? C major, and then the tragic turn. So here we've got this chorale turning, you know, again there's a hint of Bach, isn't there? It's like an ecclesiastical turn here, but so gorgeous because we've come through so many different moods within just a couple of bars. This is the dominant of A minor with the trumpet theme in the thumb. Look at that false relation. A false relation is when within the counterpoint you have a collision between a G sharp in this case in the harmony and then a G natural above it, and it creates this wonderful poignant effect because you've got the harmony of the dominant 7th and the fanfare, and then this lovely melancholy voice, it's like the last person left in the world lamenting. It's just so gorgeous, isn't it? It has. Rosen talks about lack of intensity. What the hell? This is incredibly intense music. Look at this. And then finally, the resolution as we first heard it, but extended that diminished 7th, resolving to E minor. The pedal goes down, so there's resonance all over this, and we have a solitary voice just in the wilderness crying out. And then the response. All in E minor, but the sonority of the piano being used in this wonderful poetic way, the pedal down and this wonderful rich resonance of E minor. That's a masterpiece. I want everyone to chip in and comment on this. Mendelssohn, great composer. It's absolute nonsense that these pieces are bland and boring. Yes, they're not super virtuosic and they're not super complicated. But it takes a genius to manipulate the basic fabric of music, of the late classical style in that way, and create these superbly expressive effects. I think there's been huge amounts of misunderstanding about Mendelssohn because he composed music that people could play on their pianos at home, you know, just domestic music, that somehow he's trite or trivial. It's such nonsense. He's somebody who's making great music accessible for people to play on their pianos at home. And that actually is a great thing, not something to be derided. Let me know your thoughts about Mendelssohn. I think he's a great composer. Let's have a conversation. Thanks for watching. If you like the channel, please subscribe, press the little bell. If you like the t-shirts, have a look in the video description because there's a special discount that we offer from our channel on the website, on the Amadeus Apparel website. So get your t-shirt. This one's of Chopin. I'm afraid I don't have a Mendelssohn t-shirt. I'll have to see if I can get one. In the meantime, have a great week. I'll see you next time.